Every single year, a literal tidal wave of ambition hits the global economy. Thousands upon thousands of new businesses are launched by eager entrepreneurs who've poured their hearts, their time, and honestly, usually their life savings into a dream. But beneath all that optimism, well, there's a pretty sobering reality. A massive, almost terrifying number of these ventures are never going to survive past their first few years. So today, throughout this explainer, we're going to unpack the anatomy of why these dreams die and break down the exact mechanics of business collapse.
Okay, let's dive into this because it presents a fascinating paradox. Think about the era we're living in right now. Entrepreneurs have unprecedented, immediate access to modern tools, global talent, AI, ridiculously cheap cloud computing, and just limitless educational resources. You can literally set up a global storefront from your kitchen table in a matter of hours. So with all these advantages practically handed to us on a silver platter, why do they still fail? Why is the startup graveyard growing faster than ever before?
It's wild how this contrast perfectly captures the trap so many founders fall right into. The barrier to entry, it is historically low. We've totally democratized the launch phase of a business. You don't need a factory anymore, you just need a laptop and Wi-Fi. But the barrier to survival, that remains incredibly high. Because, well, starting a business is basically an administrative task, right? But surviving in business, that is a relentless daily battle of strategy, psychology, and execution. The sheer ease of starting kind of lulls founders into this false sense of security, which makes them drastically underestimate the brutal realities of the open market.
That brings us to Section 1, Misreading the Market.
To really understand this survival barrier, we've got to look at how entrepreneurs fundamentally misunderstand the very people they're supposed to be serving. A lot of the time, they're just blinded by their own enthusiasm. It usually starts with the most tragic mistake of all, no market demand. Meaning, you spend months or even years creating a product or service that literally nobody actually wants or needs to buy. And look, it doesn't matter if your app has the cleanest code ever written or if your physical product is an absolute engineering marvel. Building a theoretically flawless product means absolutely nothing if there's zero real-world demand for it. It's that classic, if you build it, they will come fallacy. Spoiler alert, they usually don't. You have to solve a real problem, not an imaginary one you just invented in your head.
But hey, let's say you actually do have a great product that solves a real problem. The next hurdle is weak branding and marketing. You fail to stand out and clearly communicate your value in a hyper-crowded marketplace. In today's attention economy, the best product doesn't always win, the best known product often does. If your target audience doesn't know you exist, or if they can't immediately understand why your solution is better than the 10 other competitors popping up in their social media feeds, your brilliant business, it just remains completely invisible. And this brilliantly illustrates the next lethal balancing act founders have to walk: incorrect pricing. Pricing is so delicate. If you charge too much, you price yourself entirely out of the market and send your customers running straight into the arms of your competitors. But on the flip side, if you charge too little in an attempt to just win a price war, you are actively destroying your profit margins. Sure, you might be getting sales, but you're quite literally paying your customers to do business with you. Obviously, neither scenario is sustainable.
Which leads us directly to how founders double down on these errors: ignoring feedback. This is the sheer refusal to listen to what your paying customers are actually telling you. Honestly, it's astonishing how often a founder's arrogance or stubbornness gets in the way of their own survival. Customers will literally tell you what they hate about your pricing, your branding, or your product. But when leadership dismisses those criticisms and plows ahead blindly with their original vision, they end up building the wrong thing entirely and alienating the exact people keeping the lights on.
All right, let's look at Section 2, the cash flow trap.
So the crucial point is this stark, terrifying number right here: 0. Assuming a business actually manages to navigate the market, they often stumble right into the cold, hard financial realities that quietly bleed companies dry. This 0 represents a bank account running dry. You see, a business can look amazing and be profitable on paper, but if the cash isn't physically in the bank to make payroll on Friday or pay the suppliers on Monday, the game is over. Poor cash flow management stops operations instantly. If you're waiting 60 days for clients to pay you, but your software subscriptions and your rent are due every 30 days, that gap is going to mathematically pull you under no matter how many sales you've actually made. And ironically, one of the biggest drivers of this cash flow trap is success itself. Healthy growth means planned scaling, sustainable hiring, and keeping the business cash positive. But contrast that with a highly dangerous trap: growing too fast. You get a surge in sales, so you start unplanned scaling. You sign a massive office lease, you start overhiring, and suddenly you're burning through cash at an alarming rate. Then, when sales inevitably normalize, you're left with this inflated infrastructure you can no longer afford. Growth is great, for sure, but uncontrolled growth, that's a parasite.
Which brings us to Section 3, the internal ruin. This gets to the underlying cause of both the market and the financial failures. Let's shift our focus inward to the people and the leadership issues that rot a business from the inside out. At the very core of internal ruin is poor leadership and decision-making. At the end of the day, a company is really just a reflection of the people steering the ship. When there's a lack of solid leadership at the helm, it creates this catastrophic ripple effect across the entire company. A bad leader doesn't just make one bad choice, they create an entire culture where bad choices are tolerated, where communication breaks down, and where the company's true north is constantly shifting.
So, what does poor leadership look like in practice? Well, it manifests in a few specific failure points. First up, hiring the wrong people. If you bring on toxic or unskilled team members, they are going to drive away your best talent and alienate your customers. Second is a blind failure to adapt to changing markets. The market does not care about your legacy. If consumer habits shift, you have to shift with them. And third, failure to adapt to new technology. If your competitors are using modern tools to cut their costs in half, and you're still doing things the old, slow way just because that's how it's always been done, you are actively engineering your own obsolescence.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 4, Death by 1,000 Cuts.
As we reach the climax of our explainer today, it's absolutely crucial to understand that the failures we've just discussed, the pricing, the marketing, cash flow, leadership, they rarely happen in isolation. This snowball effect almost always begins at step one, a fundamental lack of long-term business strategy. The founder just doesn't really know where they're going. And because they lack direction, we move to step two. They start hiring the wrong people, bringing on teams that don't align with any cohesive vision, which naturally cascades into step three, poor execution and compounding errors. The bad hires mismanage the cash flow, they ignore the customer feedback, they mess up the pricing. What started as an initial lack of strategy has cascaded into a total avalanche of operational failure that ultimately crushes the business.
Which brings us to the core thesis of our entire investigation today. Businesses rarely fail because of one big mistake. They usually fail because of many small mistakes that are ignored for too long. It's almost never a sudden, dramatic explosion. It's the slow, quiet leak in the hull that just goes unnoticed day after day, month after month, until the ship is entirely underwater.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative question to apply to your own endeavors, whether you're running a startup, leading a team, or just managing your own career. Look at your daily operations and ask yourself, are you ignoring the small mistakes today that will compound into tomorrow's failure? Because success isn't just about making massive, bold moves. It's about having the sheer discipline to fix the tiny, boring cracks before they have the chance to bring your entire foundation down.